Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Masks Off. I'm Kim Gross and I'm so happy that you're here this week. And I have a guest with me and she is Natasha D'Archangelo. And we're going to have a conversation about the people pleaser and the perfectionist and how both of those, masks, because this is Masks Off, how those masks, aka patterns, aka things that we just do, that we have come up with and that we do, and how that relates to trauma. But as always, I'm going to start with the quote, and the quote is one that was chosen by Natasha, and one of my favorite ones. Tara Brach uses this quote a lot, and it makes so much sense. So here it is. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom. And that is by Viktor Frankl. Oh my God. It's just so profound.
Yes.
And yet so hard to do. Would you agree that it's so hard sometimes to pause?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
And you know what? And so you probably from your training can give more of an explanation as to why that is so hard. But before we jump in and start chatting away,
Sure.
how about if you let the listeners know who you are and what makes Natasha?
Well, that could take the whole time in and of
Okay.
itself, right? Hi, everybody. Natasha D'Archangelo. I am in Florida, a qualified supervisor, and then in Florida, Washington, and Oregon, licensed mental health counselor. I'm a nationally certified counselor, a certified clinical trauma professional, and a compassion fatigue educator, as well as a certified compassion fatigue professional. So do a lot of talks on trauma, burnout, helping professionals who are caregivers as well. And in my full-time job, I work with clients who struggle a lot with anxiety, with trauma, with depression, things like that. And I'm really, really passionate about destigmatizing mental health. I have had anxiety since I was in elementary school. I don't really ever remember not having anxiety. So I really enjoy working with clients that also struggle with anxiety. I really enjoy working with clients who are first generation American. That's an identity that I have. And I really want to make sure that folks know that there are therapists that look like me out there, because I don't think that a lot of people realize that there are BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, and people of color who are working in this field. And so I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here and hopefully help folks come to a better understanding of themselves and, maybe connect them to some resources that could also be potentially helpful as well. So yeah, happy to be here.
Yes. Oh my goodness. That's awesome. So let's break down the quote a little bit because
Yes.
there's so much in it, right? So
Yes.
I think it would benefit if I just kind of look at it again and read it again and we can
Yes.
break it down.
Absolutely.
Between the stimulus and the response, there's a space, right? Between the stimulus and the response, there's a space.
And Viktor Frankl, his gift to the world was Man's Search for Meaning. And if you haven't read that, then I would really strongly encourage you to do it because he's a Holocaust survivor. And he lived in a concentration camp. And even in those circumstances, he was able to find beauty in life. He was able to find something that could keep him going.
Yep.
And if he can do that in those circumstances, then I believe that everybody who has a history of trauma, as extensive as that history of trauma is, has hope. And that's one of the reasons that I really, really like that quote. So I've done the majority of my training with Dr. Eric Gentry.
Yes.
He's the founder of the Forward Facing Institute. Highly recommend his work if you're not familiar with it. And he always starts his trainings with the Viktor Frankl quote. And the reason for that is because it leaves you with this message of hope, right? And so often the folks that come to me with a history of trauma, they feel like there's nothing they can do.
Yeah.
It's, this is how it's been my whole life. This is how it's going to be my whole life. And I'm just stuck. And sometimes I have to hold space for them for that hope. But that's why we want to focus on that there is a space between the stimulus and response. And I know that it doesn't feel like that, but I promise you that it does exist. It just takes sometimes working with a professional to be able to understand yourself a little bit better and to be able to identify what that space looks like. And then the power is, because he says this is where our freedom lays. What do you do? What do you do with that space? Yeah. And everybody has the ability to do something with that space. I promise you, you don't go from 0 to 100.
No.
There's a lot of
That would
things
be
that
the
happen.
perfectionist thinking that you go from 0 to 100.
Yes. There's a lot of things that happen in between. It just feels like it goes so quickly because we don't yet have the self-awareness that there is that space between the stimulus and response. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And so, like, all right, even for myself, I have been on a path of inner growth, personal growth, inner work for a long, long time. And I can remember back years ago thinking that things would never change, just like you described, those clients that might say, oh, but it's not going to be different for me. How it's not, it's just it won't be different. And I can remember thinking, like, I'm doing all this work. Why aren't things changing? Why isn't it changing? And it really, it took time. First of all, it did take me some, to keep changing my thought patterns, changing my inner dialogue, doing the healing. But that was the work in that space. That's the space that I was in.
Yes.
Right. So
Absolutely.
the stimulus might have been whatever, I mean, how about if we just dive right into the trauma piece of it, and let's talk about the perfectionist and the people pleaser.
Absolutely.
Because those are two masks that I've worn, and I still can work at taking them off. Like when I was little, they were very glued on, very glued. Because when I was little, I learned quickly, and then this probably plays into the Eric Gentry stuff as well, because if you want to bring in the little c trauma, right, and talk about the complex trauma, is that so for me, I learned very early on that I had to please, perfect, and perform if I wanted to have that attachment, to be loved, to, stay attached. Otherwise, if I didn't, there was such a fear of rejection, such a fear of abandonment, that I would rather forego my own self, and I would rather betray my true self and just do what the other wanted me to do, or just perfect all the time.
Yeah.
That for me was trauma.
Absolutely. And so I want to take it back even further. And I want folks to think about those of you that are parents or those of you that are caregivers to young children. Doesn't it amaze you how quickly they develop, right?
Oh my God.
And you can just see almost in real time their neural connections kind of pinging off of each other, right? Yeah. And those first few years of life especially are hugely important as far as laying the foundation for the people that your child or these young folks that you're responsible for are eventually going to become, right? And one of the things that we know is that if you grow up in a household where there is a lot of trauma, so folks that have high ACEs scores, that stands for the adverse childhood experiences, they statistically later on in life are going to experience negative effects from that. Oftentimes they have higher rates of anxiety, higher rates of depression, higher rates of PTSD. So if you grow up in a household where you came home with an 85, for example, on a spelling test, right? And that meant that you got beaten. which is
Yeah.
not an uncommon story with the folks that I work with. What you learned was that you had to be perfect at all of the things. And if you were not perfect at all of the things, then you were going to get hurt.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
And it was the people, your caregivers, your parents in some cases, who were supposed to love and care for you and support you the most, who were inflicting this pain upon you. And so what you learn at a very young age is that it's a transactional thing. And the only way to keep the people around you happy was to be perfect at all of the things.
Yeah.
So you didn't just do this with your parents. I can just about guarantee that you did it with your teachers too, because you were scared to disappoint your teachers. And then once you became an adult, it transformed into probably your friendships,
Yeah.
your romantic relationships, and your work relationships as well. So you're the person at the office when there's a deadline coming up who's working 14 hours a day. You're not sleeping, you're not eating, you're at your desk and you are just busting your behind. And your boss would probably tell me, but you are the top performer on their team. And they wish that everybody was like you, right? But you and I know that inside you are still that absolutely terrified 6-year-old who got an 85 on an exam and is scared to now go home and tell your parents because you know what's going to happen. So here's the funny thing about your nervous system. Is another thing that I want to debunk is that a lot of people come to me and tell me that they're broken or they're defective. You are not broken if you are a perfectionist. You are not defective if you are a people pleaser. What happened is you learned at a very young age, based on your sensory experiences, that it was safer for you to be perfect at all of the things.
Yeah.
And so even though you may be, I'm just going to throw out 30 there as an age, even though you may be 30 and you're an adult and you're living on your own and you have a full-time job, in your nervous system, you're still that 6-year-old who's getting beaten for that 85 on that spelling test, right? And that's the space between stimulus and response. So in your nervous system, you may have gone into fight or flight. And this is why I say that even though it feels like you go from 0 to 100, you're not. Your nervous system does give you warnings. And in everybody, the warning that you get is muscle tension. So if you are, you get an email from your boss and it's something like, hey, I need to see you at 2:00. That's all you get. Right? Yeah, exactly. That's what most people are. My perfectionists and my people pleasers. That's
what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong?
Did I thought and you're going to panic, right? You're going to panic until that 2:00 meeting comes. And then, it's your boss telling you, and I'm so sorry, but we changed things with the holiday party and, we're not going to do it at the original venue. We're actually going to be at the place down the street. Right. And you're, oh, thank goodness.
To me so many times.
Right? Yeah.
Natasha, I can't believe you're saying that.
And what was that? What happened in that moment? You immediately tensed up. You may not have been aware of it, but you immediately tensed up because your nervous system was saying to you, you were not perfect at all of the things, and therefore something bad is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
So what you need to do is you need to bring yourself back to the present moment. What happened then is not what's happening now. And also, because you're here to tell me the tale, you've already survived the worst of it. You already made it through. And that tells me that you have the ability within you to make it through this thing as well. Yeah. And I'm not saying that this is easy, right? Dr. Gentry likes to say that this stuff it's simple, but it's not easy.
It's not.
However, you can deprogram yourself. You have the ability to create what you want your truth to be and not what that truth was that was established when you were a young child. And here's the other thing I want to say. A lot of times people will discount their traumatic experiences and say, well, it wasn't that bad. Or I know that there were people that had it worse than me, right? To which my response almost always is, there's no such thing as the suffering Olympics. Are there people that had it worse than you? Absolutely. There's also lots of people that had it better than you.
Mm.
And so by discounting your own experience, all you're doing is invalidating your own life story. That serves you absolutely no purpose. And my point with that is, maybe you weren't beaten for getting that 85, but maybe when you came home with that 85, your parent looked at you and said, an 85?
Mm.
Why would you bring this into my house? I am incredibly disappointed in you. You never do this again. The next time you come into this house with a test, it better have 100 on it. Do you understand me? Right? I
Yeah.
think most people looking at that wouldn't qualify that as a traumatic event. Yeah. However, if we're talking about 7 or 8-year-old you, your
Yeah.
brain's not fully formed yet, right? That is a fearful thing, because the next time your teacher hands you a test and maybe you get a 60 on it, what's going to be the first thing that happens inside your body? You're going to go, oh, the last time I brought home an 85, and mom said I better not bring home anything less than 100. And now you're going to have this fear response, a fight or flight response, the entire time leading up to coming home with that test. And so is it capital T trauma? Maybe not, but that doesn't mean that it's not lowercase t trauma that happened probably hundreds, if not thousands
Yeah.
of times from K to 12 as you were growing up. And now you have this instinctual fear response when it's anything performance related. That
Absolutely.
doesn't make you broken. It means
Yeah.
that your nervous system is working overtime.
Absolutely. And I think I would even take it another step forward, not another step forward, but even in a different direction as well, is to say that one of the things that I do when I teach my 5-step power pathway is that what I have clients do is to really go inward and embrace the inner child, embrace the parts of you that you cut off from. Because what you just described when you said, oh, it's not no big deal, many people have it worse than me, or when you're having that kind of inner dialogue, there's two things that are going on. Again, you said it, discounting the experience,
Mhm.
and two, there's spiritual bypass. You can't ignore and push away those feelings and those parts of yourself. So I really have clients learn the practice and the skill of going in and loving the inner child, having self-compassion, self having grace for your inner child. And it doesn't mean that you're indulging, it just means that your adult self is helping your inner child or your little girl self, little boy self, to feel more integrated and to know that that part is included.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, as long as we keep cutting off and pushing away those parts of ourselves, that little 7-year-old that got the 85 that still is showing up in the adult self, as long as we keep shunning that, we're just going to continue to perpetuate
Yeah.
that pattern. And then I
Yeah.
like to use the quote that Dr. Shafali uses a lot. And she says that, do you want to live a pattern or do you want to live a life?
Mhm.
So as long as we continue, if we're living out patterns, we're not coming from our wholeness. We're not fully integrated. And that's in my work, like what I do with clients, that's my work, is to help clients become more fully integrated.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of that comes with that inner dialogue too, right?
Yeah.
So if it's not something that you would say to the 6-year-old version of you or to the 7-year-old version of you, then
Right.
it's not something that you should be saying to yourself now. You're as worthy of love and respect as you were when you were 6 or 7, but those needs were not being met through no fault of your own. You didn't choose that. That was not your fault. And as here's the other thing too with people pleasing. So Dr. Gentry talks about an external versus an internal locus of control. And my people pleasers, I'm a recovering people pleaser, getting better at it, not perfect at it. With the folks that I work with that are people pleasers, what's happened because you learned at such a young age that it's your job to keep everybody around you happy,
Yeah.
you deny your authentic self. And so whether in a romantic relationship or a work environment or a friendship, you're not being true to you. You're being who you think the people around you want you to be.
Yep.
And I have a lot of clients who will describe to me like, oh, I hung out with people and I needed a whole weekend to recover. Well, the reason you needed a whole weekend to recover is because you had this mask on.
Yeah.
You were not being you.
Yeah.
You
It's
were trying.
exhausting.
It is exhausting. You were trying to say the things that you thought that they wanted to hear. You were trying to behave in the ways that you think that they wanted you to behave because you learned so young that being authentically you was not safe, right? One of my favorite Dr. Gentry quotes, we call them Gentryisms in the class that I'm in with him right now, is that it is none of my business what other people think about me.
Yeah.
And you did not have the choice then when you were your younger version of you, but you have the choice now, talking about living a pattern or living a life
Right.
of, do you want to continue living your life where your self-worth is determined by the people around you?
I know.
Or do you want to be the captain of your ship and you determine what your self-worth is?
Yeah.
And that's a difficult shift to make. But I think that there is no better investment in your time and in your energy, because you're never going to be able to please everybody around you. Your boss is always going to want you to take on more projects and to work more hours, right? And so a much better use of your time and energy is being you, being the person that you want to be, and switching over from that external to an internal locus of control. And let me tell you, it's a journey that I've been taking myself. It feels so much better on those days where I walk away and I'm like, oh, yes,
I agree. I
that
agree.
felt
And,
good. That was me.
we just came off the holidays, right? So I was sharing on TikTok in some of my videos that when I was wearing the people pleaser mask heavily, I used to have and I don't know if this sounds like a lot to people, but it was exhausting for me. I used to have 30 people on my Christmas list, and it was not one gift for every person. It was like,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, I know,
It's a lot.
like expensive, but it was so exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
And the underlying like root of that was I was trying to please all these people and just trying to get them the
Find
perfect,
the right thing.
the
It has to
right
be the
thing,
perfect gift.
the
Yes.
perfect gift so that they would be happy, 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 happy. And then I just dreaded the holidays because I was so exhausted, trying to do all that. So this year, I mean, now it's down to like just my kids, my husband, like way cut it down.
Yeah.
I didn't even start until a week or two before Christmas to shop. And I was like, and I so enjoyed the holidays. I didn't have that pressure.
Absolutely.
I was more present
Yes.
in
Yes.
the moment,
Yes.
which was a present to them that I was
Absolutely.
present. And I had more joy to just enjoy the holidays. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just wanted to share that example because it's just one way of showing how I just went from really trying to please. And it goes along with the story you were sharing about the client who said after spending a whole weekend around certain people, why they're so exhausted.
Yeah. Just worn out. It is because it's a mask that you're trying to keep on and you're denying who you authentically are. I would say maybe 80% of the sessions that I did in December were about folks trying to make it through the holidays.
Oh, I'm sure.
It's a really, really hard time for a lot of people,
Time.
And what I ended up doing, because we played this game in my family too, right? Is we buy for the littles, right? Because I have 3 nephews, and do they need more things? No, but do we get them more things? Yes. And so we buy for the littles, but for the adults, I was like, instead of spending money on each other for things that we don't need, right?
Yeah.
Because let's be honest, at this point, if I need it, I can buy it for
Go get
myself,
it.
unless it's like
Yeah.
a new car.
And no one's gonna probably buy you a new car for
Correct,
Christmas. So
exactly. So I was like, why don't we take the money that we would have otherwise spent on each other? We put it into a communal pool, and
yeah.
then everybody writes down the name of their favorite nonprofit, and we pick a name out of a hat.
Yeah.
And so the last year was the Trevor Project that won.
Yeah.
And the Trevor Project got money that and they're going to put it to good use. And then everybody walked away feeling like, oh, well, that felt a lot better than
Felt a
trying
lot
to figure
better.
out,
Great
so
idea.
you
Yeah.
don't have to go out of your way to try to be all things to all people.
You
I
just
promise you, you will be less exhausted if you take the mask off and let your true light shine through. You may have needed to keep this mask on until you turned 18 or whatever age you were when you got out of that environment. And that mask served you well for that period of time. The problem is now it's getting in the way of you being able to lead the life that you want to live and have the relationships that you want to have. You
absolutely.
don't have to walk around being exhausted all the time. You can recognize, here comes my assistant. You can recognize that you are not in immediate life-threatening danger.
Yeah.
Take 5 seconds and relax the muscles of your body. Like if you got that email from your boss,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
they need to see you at 2 o'clock. Is it uncomfortable? Yes. Is it life-threatening? No. So you
Mm.
don't need your fight or flight response. And you can relax the muscles of your body. And that's going to help you make it through to 2 p.m.
Mm.
And if you do that 100 times a day,
Yeah.
you're going to feel a lot more comfortable inside your body. Think about the next time that you have a work event and you're I'm going to go
Reading.
be around people and shake hands and all of this. Is it going to be uncomfortable? Probably. Is it going to be life-threatening? No.
Mm.
And if you stay in a relaxed body, if you keep your muscles relaxed, you're not going to walk away as exhausted. Because
Yeah.
what's happening is you've gone into fight or flight mode, but there's no life-threatening
Yeah.
danger. And so your nervous system has worn itself out trying to protect you from this there's no bear in the room with you, right?
Exactly.
And your nervous system is like, we're gonna die, except that you're at a work event. You're not gonna die,
Exactly.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's beautiful. So I appreciate this conversation, and you just offered so much like wisdom and good pointers for sure. So this is going to be a great episode. I do have 5 rapid fire questions if you're ready.
Sure. Have
Okay.
at it.
All right, awesome. What's your favorite food or food group? Some guests are like, I can't name one food, but I can give you a food group.
Chocolate.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything chocolate and I'm a New York City girl, so
Mm,
forever New York City pizza, New York City Chinese food. Yes.
gotcha. That's great. If you could go anywhere in the world, where would you go?
Um, oh, New Zealand. I have a friend that lives in New Zealand. I'd love to visit her.
Mm,
Yes.
okay. What is your favorite way to take care of yourself?
Well, this is my one office assistant, but I have another office assistant who is my puppy, and she is
Mm.
a certified therapy dog.
Ah,
And we do therapy dog visits in the community, and it is so just fulfilling. I walk away feeling so good, and people always thank us for going because it's a volunteer thing that I do, but I walk away feeling just so fulfilled that I'm able to share her joy with the universe. Yeah, dogs, let me tell you, dogs are the best kind of, she's a better therapist than I'm ever going to be, and I know that.
I know.
We don't deserve dogs.
They don't get the credit that they should get for
Yeah.
sure. Name one book that changed your life.
Well, we already mentioned Viktor
Mm.
Frankl, but I would say outside and above that, I really liked, oh goodness, I have to choose one. Irvin Yalom's The Gift of Therapy. really transformed my clinical practice. Yeah.
Mm.
He's a big name in the field, and it's just fantastic.
I'll have to put that one in the show notes. You can give me that after we finish recording.
Sure.
What is one, and you gave so many different things in the episode, which was phenomenal, but one tip or one takeaway for the listeners?
I want everybody to know that it is okay to not be okay.
Mm,
If there was one thing I really wish that we understood as a society, it
mm,
is that if you had a friend who used this, who they came to you and they said, I worked out, I think, too hard the other day. And then ever since then, my foot's swollen and it's black and blue and I can't really put any weight on it. You wouldn't hesitate in telling your friend, have you seen a doctor about that? I feel like you need to go get that checked out. But we don't have those conversations about mental health. Your
mm,
brain is an organ. It also needs to be taken care of. And so if you have somebody in your life that trusts you enough to say, I've been feeling really depressed or really anxious or suicidal,
mm,
it's okay for you to say to them, I love you and I'm glad that you told me that. How can I help? Or let me help you find somebody.
mm.
I have a therapist. She's absolutely fantastic. I think all therapists should have a therapist.
Yeah.
Um, and there should be no shame in
Mm,
people. I can't tell you the amount of talks that I've done, and people are like, "You have a therapist?" Absolutely, I have a therapist.
yeah.
And everybody should have a therapist. So if there's one takeaway, if you've been questioning whether or not you should go to therapy.
Yeah.
We go to school for this. I really do feel like this is my calling. I love sitting with people. I love holding space for people. And we're out here, we're ready, willing, and able to listen. And there's nothing wrong with taking care of your mental health.
Mm. I have to say that I am really grateful that you're doing the work that you're doing. I can just tell by your energy that you must be a phenomenal therapist. I can
Thank you.
see you having so much compassion. I can see you holding that space and container for people. So, I mean, I know that you you see people in certain states, but if someone wanted to reach out to you, how can they best find you?
Sure. So I do have a LinkedIn. You're welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn, or I am at my first name and my last name,
Yeah.
no apostrophe. So Natasha D'Archangelo at gmail.com. That is not a HIPAA compliant email. So if you do choose to reach out to me by that email, please do not send me any personal,
Yeah.
really personal information. But if you're, hey, I think I have anxiety, but I don't know where to get started.
Yeah.
Certainly I'm happy to connect folks to resources. Therapyden.com is a great search engine, since I've thrown that out there now as a question. But yeah, I would say either LinkedIn or natashadarcangelo at gmail.com would be the two
Awesome. And
places.
I will also have that in the show notes as well. So thank you so much for being a guest.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me and
Oh,
letting me
you're
have the
welcome.
platform.
You just have so much wisdom. You shared so many good tips. It's
Thanks.
awesome. So thank you everybody for tuning in to another episode of Masks Off. I hope that you enjoyed this episode and all that Natasha shared with us. And I will see you next time on Masks Off.